who were manipulated.
Yeah, that's good.
I liked it.
Done.
It's kind of saucy. It's like in music videos in the 90s. So they were get low. And,
Alright. Ignore you love the ratio.
I tried all that. Every angle, even a new screen.
Okay. If you have questions off the graphics, we have printouts. So if it's two diagonal, copy and paste right now.
Alright. Next, let's call to order. Can we get
No, we'll just briefly introduce ourselves. And my name is Keith Bray with the City Department of Transportation. And we're here to give a presentation about some school safety improvements in the neighborhood. I'm glad you're here. So I'll have everybody start a lane and go across there, please.
Hi everybody, my name is Elena Leola. I'm a Deputy Director of School Safety at DOT.
Hi, I'm Nick Carey. I'm the Director of School Safety at DOT.
I'm Kate Graham. I'm just the project manager at School Safety at DOT. But I'm really excited to share this project with you today.
Yeah. And I have some hard copies I can hand out afterwards. So you can look at. Okay.
And just for your information as well, I'm Ethan, I'm the chair. Paco is secretary. And Felice
second chair.
So basically, everyone communities here too. So.
I'm Valerie Fleming, just a member of the community for 60 years.
Good to see you, Ms. Fleming, of course. 100% remember you, of course.
Of course. Thank you for coming out.
Dr. Robertson, President of Washington Animal Block Association.
Excellent. Thanks for being here.
Jeff Glenham, member of Transportation.
Andrew, resident member.
Awesome.
All right, ready?
Great. Thank you all for being here. As I mentioned, my name is Kate. I'm a project manager with the Department of Transportation School Safety Unit. High level, what our unit does is we look at street improvement projects in areas with a high number of youth, specifically youth injuries caused by car collisions. So we are looking today at Brooklyn Ave, and Kingston Ave, and Empire Boulevard, and then Brook Street, and I'll give some context as to what made our team kind of look in this area and how we can improve safety here. So a little background, kind of the core of our team's work is looking at a program called Vision Zero. And Vision Zero is a multi-agency effort to reduce traffic fatalities in New York to zero. And the guiding principle of this work comes from data analysis, looking at crashes and injuries throughout the city, and specifically through our borough action plans, borough by borough data at where collisions happening and where are people getting injured. And through that, they identify priority intersections, corridors, and then areas that we should focus our work to improve safety. And when we look at Brooklyn Ave and Kingston Ave, it's located within a Vision Zero priority area. It's kind of this red central Brooklyn blob here. And then Kingston Ave, Rutland Road, and Empire Boulevard are all Vision Zero priority corridors. So that means that they have a higher percentage of crashes and specifically injuries on those roads. Specifically looking at the slice of this corridor, we saw that there are over 10 schools within a block of Brooklyn and Kingston Ave. So really high school density happening in this section of the neighborhood. If you look at a 5-minute walk radius, there's over 15 schools. So we have a lot of young people and a lot of students walking around on these two corridors within the neighborhood, especially around arrival and dismissal time. We've also been hearing different concerns from neighborhood schools as well as members of CB9 about speeding and dangerous driving behavior on these two corridors. I mean, specifically in last year, we've been hearing a lot about drag racing and speeding on Kingston Ave around the George Wingate campus. So kind of this southern edge where the big campus is there. We've heard from the school about a lot of speeding happening there. So when we heard all this, we knew we needed to take a bigger look at how we can improve safety on these corridors. As we dug into the data, it essentially confirmed what we were hearing. So this is the injury data for those two corridors. What you saw is there were 158 total injuries on these corridors in the last 5 years. 71% of the severe injuries here were pedestrians and cyclists, or most vulnerable roadway users. We also saw that 50% of those pedestrian injuries were happening while they're crossing with the signal, right? So you have the walk sign, you're doing what you're supposed to, and you're still getting injured by vehicles driving recklessly. We also really want to flag that children are making up 14% of these pedestrian and cyclist injuries. That's part of why it's our team specifically is looking at this corridor. And for context, 14% is about 1 in every 7 injuries as a child on these two corridors. The the other thing I'll flag in looking at kind of where this data is on the map is that we're seeing collisions not just at Empire, our big intersection, but all the way throughout the corridors, right? We have bubbles happening even at the smaller side streets, so we knew that kind of corridor-wide issues mean we might have to do some corridor-wide solutions. That's why we're looking at them as full 2 corridors and not just touch points at 1 or 2 blocks. Kind of putting a story to that data, like what do we see on the roadway? Can we get some examples of what we're seeing out there? And Keith's going to pass out some printouts so that you can follow along, or if you want to read it, not distort it.
This was not the best.
Oh, we saw some squinting eyes. This might be a helpful tool. Thank you.
No one called me there. Literally no one.
Great. So yeah, I just transitioned into the existing conditions section if that helps you find it in the PowerPoint. So the first kind of big thing we see here is that the roads are really wide. And the reason wide roadways are concerning is because when we have a wide roadway paired with low traffic volumes, essentially an open free for all to speed. And that's what we're seeing on these corridors. Currently, Brooklyn and Kingston Ave, for the majority of the stretch, are 43 feet wide. And then they widen out even significantly further to 57 feet when you cross Rutland Road. And for context, 57 feet is the same as like 5th Avenue in Manhattan, which is striped for 4 moving lanes of traffic, right? Huge thoroughfare. And this is a neighborhood street in front of the school. Super wide. And the data confirms that. So we conducted a speed radar study at a couple different points throughout the neighborhood. We always want to check our hunch with data, right? And it's exactly what we expected. Prevalent speeding on both corridors. At the touch point on Brooklyn Ave in front of the Bette Rivka School between Lefferts and East New York, we saw 80% of vehicles were over the speed limit. At one of the touch points on Kingston between Rutland and Winthrop in front of the high school there, over 90% of the vehicles were above the speed limit, with speeds reaching up to low 40 miles per hour. And the reason that speeds are really concerned for us is kind of this graphic over here. At 25 miles per hour, if a pedestrian is hit by a vehicle, there's a 90% chance that they're going to survive. Not good, but 90% chance they're going to survive. As the speed increases, when you get to 35 miles per hour, that drops to a 60% chance of survival. So that's kind of the average we're seeing on these corridors. And then 45 miles per hour, that chance of survival drops to 20%. And that's where we're seeing some of our peak speeds. So the concerns for pedestrians with this speeding is really high. We also know that the wide roadway creates really long crossing distances. So it has students exposed for a long time, and when we have these high volumes of students, like you're seeing here at arrival and dismissal times, a lot of kids for a long time exposed to this speeding behavior. And unfortunately, speeding vehicles often don't yield to these pedestrians. So what we see here is, vehicles speeding at arrival time right in front of 2 students trying to cross. So they have to go, and the cars aren't yielding to them. And even when a car does yield, the road is wide enough that if the vehicle is stopped, cars can go around them. Impatient drivers often will go around the stopped vehicle, not seeing that a student is already crossing in the crosswalk. So there's a lot of near miss conditions from this behavior. The other thing the wide roadways allow is for vehicles to make really fast turns onto the street. So they don't have to take a tight 90-degree turn. It's wide enough that they can take kind of a loose turn at a high speed. And that puts pedestrians at risk. And when we dug into kind of the data I showed earlier, where I said 50% of the pedestrian injuries were happening while they're crossing with the walk sign, the majority of the vehicle actions causing those injuries were turns. So that's these 2 darker teal colors, the 7 and the 3, kind of the polka dot chart, are left and right turning vehicles. So the majority of pedestrian injuries happening at crosswalk are happening from fast turning vehicles. The other thing that's contributing to these turning injuries is that there's low visibility throughout the corridor, and we saw this in a lot of touch points, where if a vehicle is parked all the way up to the crosswalk, or oftentimes in the crosswalk, you can't see pedestrians in the crosswalk. So this yellow vehicle is an example of that. If I'm driving south on Brooklyn Ave and I'm about to make this left turn when the light turns green, I gotta make that left turn, and I can't see that behind that yellow vehicle is a student crossing the street. And this condition is happening all over the corridor. The The other thing we saw was a significant amount of cyclists, but no kind of clear place for them to ride, which means that they're everywhere. If you're a driver, you can't predict if they're going to be on the left side, or the right side, or the sidewalk, or going the wrong way. And when there's not predictability, that's when you kind of create conflict, right? Like if you don't know which shoulder to look over, that's when we see collisions. So that lack of predictability was also causing some conflict in these areas. So taking all of that data and some of what we've seen on these corridors into account, we've come up with a proposal that we want to share with you today to think about how we can improve safety on these corridors, and specifically pedestrian student safety is one thing we're really looking at given this data. So I want to start with an example of a project we did on Amsterdam Ave and West 190th Street in Manhattan, because it had really similar existing conditions. So before, it was a similarly super wide road, back-end parking, a popular spot for racing and drag racing, and it's also a road right in front of a large high school campus, so very similar to George Wingate. And the project that we installed really had, the main goal is slow speeds, and the best way to do that is to narrow the roadway. And so in order to narrow the roadway, we installed a protected bike lane along the park edge, so connecting to the park. We installed speed bumps to kind of reinforce the narrow road and slowing speeds. And we were able to install curb extensions, which is this painted space here that kind of bumps out the sidewalk at the intersection, as well as pedestrian islands. So there's one shown in concrete on the other side. And those help really shorten the crossing distance. So now the time the pedestrian is exposed between those two elements is significantly shorter. And they help really improve visibility at the intersection. So you can now see people as they're waiting to cross. And so we think that a similar treatment on Brooklyn and Kingston would make a lot of sense in addressing these similar concerns. Now, one reason that protected bike lanes are being proposed to this area is because what we've seen thus far in our data is that protected bike lanes are really the biggest win for pedestrians. Where we've installed protected bike lanes, there's been a 15% drop in crashes with injuries and a 21% drop in injuries specifically with pedestrians. And the reason for this is twofold. One is that the bike lane really narrows the roadway. So like I said over and over again, wide roadway is creating speeding, narrowing the roadway helps address that. And then the other thing is that our bike lanes include pedestrian elements like those curb extensions and those islands that I was showing in the last image. So for this area, what we're proposing, high level, and then I'll get into some of the details of what this looks like throughout the corridor, is a protected bike lane going southbound on Brooklyn Ave, protected bike lane going northbound on Kingston Ave, and then a protected loop around the George Wingate campus where the road widens out. And then two standard bike lanes that pair on Rutland and Fenimore to connect into the existing network and where we see some additional schools on Fenimore Street. So now I'm going to go through kind of the cross sections of what that looks like, because there are some different widths at different points in the corridor. So the first one we have here is the northernmost section between Empire and Leffert. So that's kind of a 2 blocks on Brooklyn Ave, 1 block on Kingston Ave stretch. And this is the narrowest point in the roadway, so it's 36 feet wide. Currently, Brooklyn Ave is an 18-foot combined travel and parking lane, 2 roads, and in Kingston we have a 36-foot wide combined travel and parking lane. It's an unstriped area. And our proposal is to install a 9-foot parking lane, a 10-foot travel lane, so really narrowing that travel lane, right? That's like the key goal. I'll probably say it a million times. I'm sorry if you get tired of it, but narrowing that travel lane, and then an 8-foot parking lane, and a 6-foot bike lane with a 3-foot buffer. Now, of course, the key difference between Kingston and Brooklyn Ave is that Brooklyn is currently striped for 2 travel lanes. Our team, as part of this project, did significant traffic analysis, which involved collecting data of vehicle volume, signal timing, pedestrian counts, truck traffic, and in analyzing this data, our DOT traffic engineers and our signal timing team feel confident that south of Empire, Brooklyn Ave will flow well with 1 travel lane. And I'm going to show you kind of what that transition would look like at Empire. So here's kind of a rendering of what that transition would look like at Empire. Okay, so the key thing about this proposal is looking at adding these 2 left and right turn bays as Brooklyn Ave approaches Empire Boulevard. And the benefit of doing that is that as we approach Empire Boulevard, which is a huge kind of turning off point for Brooklyn Ave, we saw about a third of traffic exits Brooklyn Ave and Empire Boulevard, so a pretty significant amount. We're able to give them dedicated lanes to do that, and in doing that, it reduces the back pressure on the vehicles that are waiting to turn. So if you've ever been on a road where it's your turn to turn, you're waiting for that gap in traffic, and there's cars behind you, they're honking, they're getting frustrated, it's slowing traffic, sometimes they zoom around. It's both unsafe and also slows down traffic flow. So having these turn bays are helping organize traffic, and that allows us to also have the through lane, the through lane can have a longer green time while we have leading pedestrian intervals crossing Empire Boulevard. So leading pedestrian intervals are a signal timing tool that gives pedestrians 7 to 10 second head start, so the walk sign starts before the green light for turning vehicles starts. So pedestrians able to get into the crosswalk before the turns start, establishing the pedestrian right of way and reducing collisions in the turns. And while that turning vehicle is being held, the through traffic can start moving on Brooklyn. So we're actually moving traffic faster with this signal timing plan. I can answer questions about this later, but wanted to kind of explain how we're making that transition at this key point. That next section moving south of Lefferts, this is the bulk of the corridor. This is where the road is 43 feet wide, with similar existing conditions to stretch travel and parking lanes in Brooklyn, one wide lane on Kingston, and with our proposal, we're proposing a 13-foot parking lane, 10-foot travel lane, so again, narrow travel lane, 9-foot parking lane, and an 8-foot bike lane with a 3-foot buffer. And the real thing to kind of point out in this is this extra wide parking lane, 13-foot holes, pretty wide, gives us the space to install large painted curb extensions. So this is these pedestrian benefits that we're really focusing on. And these painted curb extensions are kind of exactly what they sound like. They're an extension of the corner in paint. And they help improve visibility of pedestrians who are waiting to cross. So you've now made it so you can see the pedestrians waiting for the crosswalk, as well as shortening those crossing distances. And where the curb extensions are paired with pedestrian islands, sometimes crossing distances more than half as short, 10 to 12 feet on some intersections. So really shortening the crossing distances and improving pedestrian visibility. Here's an example of what that kind of looks like in the real world. So here's an example from Crotona Park in the Bronx, where beforehand this was a high kind of T-bone intersection as cars would go to turn left, oncoming traffic would run into them because they couldn't see oncoming vehicles. As you can see, there's cars parked all the way to the crosswalk. When they implemented the pedestrian curb extension, we removed that one parking spot in front of the crosswalk, and now you have clear visibility of all oncoming traffic as well as pedestrians waiting to cross. The important thing to note here is that, of course, that does involve removing a parking spot between the crosswalk and the stop bar. And where these are implemented, in order to get those safety benefits, it's approximately 2 to 4 parking spots per intersection. The other thing bike lanes allow us to install that will really, I think, make a difference on this corridor based on what we saw in the data is turn calming treatment. So here's an example of what we call an offset crossing turn calming treatment. And that's kind of this striped area that sticks out, and what it does is it forces vehicles to make a 90-degree turn. What we were talking about earlier is right now they're able to take really wide, fast turns onto the streets. And in taking a 90-degree turn, it both slows speeds, but also now vehicles positioned so they're looking directly at the crosswalk, right? You can see pedestrians coming, where before it's kind of a diagonal cut through, and you often can't see pedestrians who started walking over your shoulder. And given that we saw turns were a huge kind of instigator of the injuries on this corridor, this is one thing we really wanted to make sure to improve. Moving to the southernmost section, which is this Rutland Road, Winthrop Street super block around the high school campus. This is where the road on Kingston widens out 57 feet. And here we're proposing to do 2-way bike lanes so that we can make a full loop around the campus. And the road is wide enough that we can do that while still maintaining back and ankle parking. I think that's because of how much width we have. So to kind of put that in context, this might be a little tricky to see at the angle, so I apologize for that. But some of the things we're looking to do here are, again, narrow the road to slow speeds. So by having the full loop around the campus, we can do that on all 4 sides of this large high school campus, which is a really big goal. We're also looking to install those curb extensions and islands at key midpoint access points to the park. So right now, there's some entrances on Brooklyn Ave that currently pedestrians don't have crossings or access points to. So wanting to improve the safety access of the mid-block points to the park. We're also investigating speed bumps, specifically on Kingston Ave, where we've seen that drag racing behavior. And then what this really does is also creates a full protected cycling loop. So you can loop all the way around the campus, connect to both bike lanes. And, you know, we've spent a lot of time doing observations in this area and talking to neighbors, and we've seen a lot of young kids, you know, first learn to ride their bike at the Wingate Park track. It's a perfect place to get that first, you know, learning experience. And this kind of gives that next step. You're feeling a little confident on your bike, and you can now have a fully protected loop on the roadway to kind of explore biking. So we think it's a really nice tie-in with the benefits that the park offers, and improving access to this really great park in the neighborhood. Zooming in specifically on the campus frontage, because again, our focus here is the students, and we've heard a lot from the George Wingate campus. It's also across the street from the League School, which is a school that serves students with disabilities. We wanted to make sure that we're doing some really intentional touch points and treatments at Rutland and Kingston, the intersection right in front of their campus. So we're proposing building out the islands there in concrete, so really hardening and enforcing that narrower road right at the intersection and shortening those crossing distances for pedestrians. We're also looking at, you know, organizing the back angle parking, plus painting stripes, but that also helps often with parking efficiency, so you can fit more spots if you have it all nice and measured out. And then looking at expanding the pedestrian space right in front of the school entrance, which is mid-block on Kingston Ave, if you've been out there. Currently, students, when they're dropped off and picked up, they have to walk between a bunch of backed-in cars, often into oncoming traffic, so trying to create a safe place for them to load and unload and access their school. And then the final section here is Fenimore and Rutland between Flatbush and Brooklyn Ave. So these are narrower roads, so we're only proposing standard bike lanes, so keep it striped bike lane. But it does help connect into, you know, these new proposed protected bike lanes into our existing network and into Bedford Ave, which connects to Prospect Park, so kind of trying to make it a part of the neighborhood network, as well as slowing traffic through painting those narrower lanes and connecting to the schools on Fenimore Street. Of course, we know that parking is always a contentious issue, and it's always a set of trade-offs. When we looked at this neighborhood, like I said, the big things that we wanted to improve are safety at the intersection and crossings for pedestrians, and some of our best tools to do that are those curb extensions and the daylighting. But as noted, that takes approximately 2 to 4 spots per block being repurposed for those visibility and short crossings. So we showed it out here in the map so you can get an understanding of where those touch points are, and trying to be transparent about what those trade-offs are. In summary, like I noted, Brooklyn and Kingston Ave is a really school-dense area, over 10 schools within a block of these 2 corridors and a high volume of students. We've heard about the speeding concerns, and our data is really backed this up, so those safety concerns have been long-standing. So to improve safety here, we're proposing, instead of protected bike lanes, narrow the roadway and slow speeds, painted curb extensions and pedestrian islands at the intersections to improve visibility and shorten crossing distances, and turn calming treatments to slow turning vehicles. That is happy for our team to answer questions, go back to any graphics that are needed. Thank you for listening to the spiel.
You're welcome. Any questions?
Yeah. Okay, can we ask questions? Is that okay?
Yeah, like at this point, yeah. Definitely.
All right. Thank you. That was a really wonderful, dedicated, thoughtful presentation. I want to say thank you for adding the first green paint in our entire community board. We don't actually have any, so this is a huge step towards actually saying we care enough about people's safety to show it on the roads. I'm curious what the next steps are and what you're still considering. What other further decisions you might need to make before this is implemented.
Yeah, so we are, the skill set to navigate that is a little less strong. So I think that that's a really interesting idea to look into how do we talk to people about that, and maybe PSA there. And I think we have to think specifically about the role of children and how we teach them about those skills.
I know don't think it's just children, I see some
Yeah.
adults. I
I guess
see
it's
it.
that old time, what was that,
I mean,
cross
you don't wanna
across
put
the
the
green, not in
security.
between?
Well,
No, go ahead, sir.
Good. Crossing the green and not in between.
Right.
Well,
That's-
Sunday, this is what happened to me. I'm going, getting ready to cross Bedford from Crown. I have the right of way. My light is green, and this pedestrian just walked across in front of my car. So I had to not. They saw me. I know they saw me because they just wouldn't look, and they just walked straight across. So if there is data that shows like the behavior pattern, so that we can kind of know for all segments of the population and stuff, you know.
I'm with
Just
you.
because
We
I'm
always want
35 or
more
40
data.
years old.
It's
Yeah.
not just, I appreciate what Val was saying, it's not just pedestrians though, it's cyclists. It's this battle for dominance of the street, regardless of what the traffic light says, right? Crossing the green, not in between, pedestrians have the right of way sight. As a matter of fact, we know if you're a motorist with insurance, that your insurance does nothing if you hit a cyclist or if you hit a pedestrian. Right? The law says it's the motorist's fault. But once again, I'm leaning towards PSA because it's not popular, right? I'm going to mention the MTA again. They just got slammed because of the suggestion that they might educate people against fare evasion, right? People like, what are you smoking? Who cares about that? But at the end of the day, there is some benefit in raising everybody's awareness about these issues. And so I think that making people aware, everybody, cyclists, pedestrians, motorists, you don't own, just because that light is green, just because the sign says walk.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
One second.
Two things I want to mention. One is, looking at this, the avenues, Brooklyn Avenue, Fifth Avenue, they don't widen until like after Lefferts Avenue or further south. So I don't know how you plan on, putting in all these bike lanes or whatever, without affecting traffic or parking in that area. And another thing is regarding the speed cameras. That if somebody's already speeding or drag racing, they don't really care much about the law. So it's very easy to defeat these speed cameras, just painting the license plate with polish or whatever, covering it over. And then are the police actually going after such people? Why not? I don't see anything in here about speed bumps. I would think that speed bumps would be. Oh, there is. Oh, okay. Because speed bumps, if you take a speed bump at 50 miles an hour, you probably wreck your car. I think that's a much bigger deterrent than a $50 fine or whatever you can. What's the maximum penalty for camera?
Yeah, we're with you. We're also investigating putting speed bumps on those key points. And specifically to your question about Empire and Lefferts, the road there is 36 feet wide, so a little narrower, and we do have a cross section. I can try to pull up. So it shows how it's fitting, and the key thing there is just connecting. Yeah, so that kind of one block stretch. That helps visualize it.
Yeah, I noticed that your data is very old, and there is what we know motorized bikes, and I don't see any recent data. I mean, you're talking about 2017, you're talking about 7-year-old data that you're talking about. There's been an increase in bike lanes and motorized, because now you're allowing motorized everything on about the scooters, and I don't see any. Why aren't you using updated data to include what's happening now, and you're going 7 years? And I'm just, you're just taking a loop around? I mean, there's no place that people are going with this bike lane, you're just kind of looping it around? Is that my understanding? You're coming off of Empire,
Yeah, that's
and you're coming down and you're looping around?
You can loop around, or you can enter the rest of the neighborhood through Rutland and Fenimore, or through existing lanes on East New York and
Maple Street.
Well, I think
Yeah.
we need to be doing, why aren't you having more updated data? Why are you not considering?
I could answer that. So I think you make a good point about, especially up in 2019. So what we did with the bicycle protected bike lane data is we looked at all the protected bike lanes we've installed citywide, where we have at least 3 years of before and after data to make sure it's, it's statistically significant. And what happened with our crash data is that things got really weird around the pandemic. conditions changed, volumes dropped for a year, they came back. So the last couple of years is it's a little touch and go for us with traffic data. It's hard to make a clean comparison. But we should, I think you're right that we should update it for up to 2019, absolutely.
I mean, that's such a poor excuse.
I wanna
Have drivers
That's
gotten
such a
more
poor
dangerous?
excuse for you to be coming here and saying that you can't tabulate the data because of 2019. You should be tabulating the data because there has been a major increase within the last 3 years of bicycle, motorized vehicles in bike lanes. We're talking about children here that are walking. You're now purposely putting in a bike lane next to a school
Yeah.
that will then encourage 20 miles, 30 miles an hour.
I think maybe there's a
Motorized
misconception.
vehicles.
We have not had
I'm
any
having
bike
some
lanes in our
trouble
district.
finding the 2017 data. The only reference of data I see is from 2019 to 2023.
So there's the most recent crash data we have is 2019 to 2023. That's the NYPD from their crash reports. I think you're referring to this, our
Yes, the protective.
our slide about.
But this
our
is
study.
citywide.
This is citywide. Yeah.
Have you seen drivers' behavior change since before the pandemic to now? Have they become more reckless?
I mean, anecdotally, I think we've all seen it, right? We've all seen. I mean, I live in a district. We see people running red lights where they wouldn't have done it 5 years ago, right?
So maybe the safety improvements are commensurate to the increase in reckless behavior we see with drivers.
We certainly feel a bigger impetus to do these things when we see more reckless behavior in the streets. And I want to point out that with protected bike lanes, we use them for as a pedestrian safety tool, not because, and the fear isn't that a cyclist is going to hit the pedestrian. The issue we're trying to solve is cars hitting pedestrians.
I know,
But-
but you're
but
not,
wait a
but you're
second.
not taking
Why-
into effect that people are being hit by bikes,
By
not
bikes.
motorized.
That's-
This is a major concern,
That's a
so I
major
don't
concern,
understand how you're not.
especially for seniors in the
Thank
city.
you. I mean, are you
Seniors are
kidding?
getting.
They're
actually,
riding on
you
the
know what?
sidewalks.
I can talk to seniors a little bit. We released a study in 2022 called it was about different safety treatments we've done, and we've released studies like this before, but they apply to the population at large. And the study was about older New Yorkers and how our different safety treatments, signal timing treatments, islands, all the different stuff, and how they apply specifically to seniors. And what we found was that with protected bike lanes, there's an even bigger benefit for seniors. We found that on average, we see a 21% drop in pedestrian injuries when we install a protected bike lane, but with seniors, it's a 36% drop. So, and it's not the same as children, but we think that, between children and some older New Yorkers, there's some overlap in the way they are especially vulnerable users. They might move a little slower crossing, they might have limited visibility. So all of our data is pointing to protected bike lanes as being one of the best, if not the best tools we have for improving
But then
pedestrian
we
safety.
need to see the data.
And we've installed them in front of schools citywide, all over.
So where's the data?
It's published on DOT website and we can provide you with the links. This is a publicly available study that DOT released a couple of years ago.
So why isn't it in fact?
We put so much information in this
This
study.
is school, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
not
so,
fair.
we
It's
can
not
add
I'm
fair.
the
just
to
going
the
by
board.
what you have here. You're
Yeah.
coming to a community,
Right,
it's
right.
2017. If you have data that's more updated, I don't understand why you didn't provide.
One question. Can I ask about the curb extensions? I think, overall, I like this plan quite a lot. I would probably be using it every single day. I take one trip to school, PS 770 on East New York Avenue, just past Utica, and the other one on Rogers and Fenimore. So I come down East New York Avenue, come down, I'd take Brooklyn, and then I would take Fenimore. So this would feel enough safe for me. On weekends, I take my kids to the Wingate Park. So I see the benefit there. I see the benefit on all these streets, and I also used to park in the, right opposite the high school, there's a big parking lot that it was the cheapest rate I could find many years ago, so I parked there all the time. The street's super wide, so I think narrowing it makes a lot of sense. And as Jeff was talking about narrowing or shortening the intersections so you have a more 90-degree turn is great. I find the downside is when it's just a painted extension, either a car parks on the paints or they very quickly knock over the flexible bollards. And so the good intentions often don't yield the safety results. So I'm curious, I know you pointed out, I think, one spot that would be in concrete. how many extensions are you talking about that are in concrete versus just paint? And like what kind of analysis do you do on like, well, if we're replacing flexible bollards, you know, every 6 months or something, like, well, we need to pour, I know it's more expensive to pour the concrete, but I think that yields, like when the traffic guard is not there on weekends, when I take my kid to Wingate Park, like they're scooting across the street, they want that smaller crossing, but you know, it could quickly go away if not done right, I guess.
Yeah, we hear you. Currently the proposal has 5 to 6 concrete islands, and no concrete curb extensions, and the reasoning for that is drainage. So unfortunately, building anything in concrete that's attached to the curb impacts the way water flows down that curb. And so curb extensions are much more difficult to build out in concrete unless you have a full capital project, which is more of like a long-term, 5 to 10 year, that includes drainage. So capital projects can look at things like building out curb extensions in concrete.
Have you considered then the addition of boulders, planters, street furniture, and going back to Ms. Fleming's point, like even the addition of street art around the school makes people feel a little bit guilty about parking in front of kids' art or on top of kids' art. So I think these other interim measures, while they might not get the full safety benefit, and like Empire is covered in bed flexi posts, like they're not useful. They give the illusion of safety.
Yeah, we definitely have a street furniture toolkit that can be implemented throughout the corridor, and part of the benefit of the 13-foot wide curb extension is versus like a 6-foot wide one, but a 13 feet wide DSMI can still clean behind if we install things like granite blocks to prevent park collisions. So it does introduce that like flexibility to harden those spaces.
And then I had another question about city bikes. I saw that you did have a plus parking spaces for city bike to be removed or relocated to the street curb or the sidewalk from the street. So there's several other docks in this area. I'm curious why some locations, but not all, were considered. I believe all of them are on the street because it is so wide.
Yeah, so that is specifically one city bike station directly in front of the Beckford school, and we're moving it 1 block south. So it's kind of a 1-for-1 trade-off. It's just where it's placed, and we wanted to again be transparent about that on the map.
But did you consider moving street docked bikes to sidewalk locations?
Yeah, we prefer that.
Yeah.
District highly.
That could get some plus parking back.
Yeah, we'll continue to share that feedback with our city bike placement team, and they work with the installation teams to see where that's feasible.
They diligently look at sidewalk location. That's the first, believe me, the first check for a city bike station can't fill on sidewalk. I can tell you, citywide, that's the first check. And if they can't go, then obviously we go on the street. But that's the first check. So if there's a place to put it on a sidewalk, they put it there.
Similarly,
let me
we
ask
work
you
so
about-
hard to minimize the parking. I mean, we understand the difficulty in parking in this district, absolutely. It's so challenging. And going through the plan, we're working so hard, looking at all the corners, how can we squeeze even one more parking spot out of it? And moving this bike share station is the one attempt we got to work through. But we understand it's a challenge, but our priority here is for the children and for the safety. And the principals are bringing us out saying it's dangerous. Our crash statistics show that it's dangerous. We go and check to see if people are speeding, and they're speeding like crazy. So we do not want to remove parking, but we're trying to prioritize safety. It's a difficult conversation to have.
Yes, sir.
In this effort of narrowing the streets, how are the school bus going to be doing their jobs? Because is that going to slow down traffic? Is that going to make it impossible for traffic to continue on these two curves?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So one thing we do is we model all the turns for vehicles. So even with the narrower turns, we make sure that things like delivery trucks, regular delivery trucks, and school buses can make all these turns comfortably. So that's one thing we're checking is school bus movements along these corridors within the proposal.
Did you realize that those school buses actually really lined up
Yes.
on all of these corridor streets because of the wideness and the ability for them to pick up kids in more than one school?
Yep.
So it's going to make it very difficult if you narrow the streets. The buses won't be able to park the way they park now. They might have to go around the block several times to pick up these kids in different schools. So that's a consideration to not slowing the traffic down, especially in rush hour, especially in the morning.
Yeah, so another element of this design that's, kind of playing that sweet spot is the wide parking lane does leave room for buses to pull into the parking lots that are no longer in the moving travel lanes. So right now, say on Brooklyn Ave, they'd be blocking one of the two travel lanes, cars will have to move around them. That movement actually slows traffic because you get the backup of people trying to merge into the other lane. With this design, you continue to have a through lane, and buses can kind of pull into that extra white parking lane as they get the movements to get students on and off the curb. So that is something that we're thinking about, is how do we make sure bus movement flows, and that's why we're also scheduling these meetings with all the schools to make sure we understand exactly what their bus operations are, where are they loading, how are we making sure that that's pulled in into this. So I think that's a really important question, and it keeps
I just want to ask about, what about doing like a scoop out? One of the schools my daughter attended, they had a scoop out. I was on, I think it's Caton Avenue, on Coney Island Avenue. It was a newer school, 839, and they had this scoop out where all the buses could pull and drop off, and the different vehicles for parents picking kids up, and it worked really well, and I felt like it took a lot of pressure off of the traffic, and I don't see any of that in these designs by the school. It was very effective, and I appreciated it compared to any other school that she went to.
Yeah, those are great, but they have to be built into the school site, so.
I've seen them added later, maybe not for
Really?
other places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I've seen them added for schools.
Yeah, I don't know if it's called a capital, but it definitely would be an involved project because we don't know what's underneath. And that's the real problem with any kind of infrastructure works.
You just scoop it out.
Yeah, but even if you scoop it out on top, it may have impacts from below and they have to check it. So it would still be something that's involved. But that's beyond the range of what we could do internally. And also, depending on where it is, it's not our property, so we can't do it. It's not just these right away. So
Sidewalk?
sidewalk could be the
This was
right
the
away, but how,
sidewalk,
but it
right?
won't.
Just like in the
How wide?
sidewalk.
Yeah, we have to look at how wide the sidewalk is and what the right way. I don't know, but it's right now that's beyond the scope of this project. The school would have to agree to it, have to look at it, and then it'd probably have to get money to be raised and all that stuff. So
I was going to ask you a question with that meeting with the Brooklyn Library
Yeah.
about a cycling PSA.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been any movement on that? Is there the DOT planning on doing that at all? Because I think it would go a long way. To have some kind of PSA on bikers and how to ride their bike in the city, how to obey the traffic laws and not go in opposite direction of the traffic, which we often do.
Or on the sidewalk.
You could probably touch on
Yeah, like
bike
the
smart.
driver's test,
Right.
you have to take a little test.
Yeah,
Right.
you could touch on bike smart in a second, but the one thing I would say, I don't know if we have a PSA when we do cyclist education, but the one thing I've heard from multiple people out there, all the other modes that people are using is that is something that actually enforcement is heavily increasing on. So both illegal mopeds, motorized
They don't have
scooters,
those big-
motorized whatever, all those things, the NYPD is having heavy enforcement on them, they're taking thousands of them at this point, and crushing them, destroying them, because they are a menace, they're not following laws, and they're not doing the right thing. I'm talking to delivery companies about being better about it, including the larger ones, to have better behavior, and we have rules that we have for restaurant delivery, and those delivery people, there actually are rules that we have within the city of New York that's supposed to follow, they're not following, we're enforcing that, so we've started enforcing that heavier well with our partners in West Virginia. Those we're working on heavily because they are a problem, so just maybe that's one.
Yeah, we also have a sort of a less punitive way to try to educate people about the rules, where we have our own, at DOT, we have a street ambassador team that can go out often after we install a project like this and, talk to people about how the new roadway design works and how they're supposed to behave, and we have a bike smart guide to the rules, and it's astonishing. You go out there and you tell people, you're explaining these rules to people, right? Like, you shouldn't run a red light, you shouldn't go against traffic, you shouldn't run on the sidewalk. And they're like, really? I can't run a red light, even in a bike? Yes, even you can't run a, so I think a lot of people don't understand that they have certain responsibilities when they're operating a bicycle, and they think that it's some kind of toy. But we do have the tools to go out and educate people. And,
You say that you go out and speak to people? Where? I mean, like
I've
what?
never seen it.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I'm not being facetious.
right, well, we don't go to every block in the city.
But like, for example.
Give us some helmets, I'll do that.
Yeah.
We do that too?
We do that.
Yeah, because the whole PSA thing, I don't believe is receiving as much attention and recognizing its value, right? Because like if you look at some bus shelters or wherever you see, when you get on a bus or train, the whole car is one message. That type of thing, I think, is what DOT or whatever other city agency needs to invest in to reach that audience, right? And it's not just one audience. If it's bicyclists today, great, and that would include skateboarders, scooters, all of those things, right? That's one audience. As I said before, the pedestrians, but we have to raise the level of awareness, right? And stop focusing solely on motorists, right? I don't want to make it sound like, oh, woe is me because I'm a motorist. But I can't bear the responsibility for other reckless people on the street. And that's the way it feels for the most part, right? Everybody's talking to motorists, but I don't hear this conversation with the rest of the people that are zigzagging all over.
Exactly.
And this has always been my motivation, is that there's a lot of responsible drivers out there, but there's also a lot of irresponsible bikers out there.
Yeah.
And everybody has to get the same education at the same level, because you cannot just pinpoint one group and say, you're gonna be penalized for this. And this, what Jeff is talking about, is exactly what I'm referring to.
Yeah, let's work together.
You can put a lot of different PSAs, advertisements all over the city, and that's what's lacking. No one is seeing it, no one is really understanding what their responsibility are. 'Cause I know, the people that I know that get on their bike and they just, they just
Take
charge
off.
and
I
speed.
mean,
It is crazy.
It is dangerous to walk on the sidewalk, let alone on the bike lane.
You know-
People have complained about bike lanes being unsafe.
Well, the way the rollout was with the e-bikes, like the way the e-bikes rolled out in the city.
Hi.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. I live on Fenimore, so I'm like happy to see something that's related to my block. It doesn't fully matter, but I mostly walk and ride my bike. And generally, I just want to express my happiness mostly as a pedestrian at seeing work toward just being able to see past the cars that are parked, because I've noticed that cars tend to park pretty close to the crosswalk and it's hard to see. So yay to that. But I had a question about the Fenimore proposal in particular, and potentially also wetland, which is, as a person who occasionally does ride my bike, I noticed that on, for example, Maple, there are cars that tend to double park, and obviously there's alternate side, and I feel for people when they're just trying to find their way around. But people do tend to just exist in the bike lane constantly, and then I have to go into traffic and feel fear for my life. And so I was wondering why, maybe it's just, the energy that it would take to get the green there, but has there been potentially consideration about switching the ordering so that the parking can be protective, and then there might be some green, just so that there's less likelihood of me having to go into traffic?
You want green on the Maple bike lane?
Mostly just on the Fenimore one that's proposed here, so that I don't have to go into traffic when I see these cars that are double parked in the lane.
Keep that aside.
I hope so.
We don't have any
Uh,
green.
Are those
We have no
double
green
park
paint
cars?
in our
For
neighborhood.
alternates.
Those are alternate sides of
It's
the
okay.
street, right?
Sometimes they're just double parked, like I've
That's
seen
green
people
grass.
literally double parking when
No,
there's a
Flatbush
spot
isn't
that's
in our
available,
district.
like
Flatbush?
slightly further down the block, like 2 cars down, for example. I'm just like,
That's what parking lot.
and I empathize for the alternate side in particular.
That's not our
totally
district.
get it.
That's
And
not
so I
our-
think
That's
that
not our
is a
district.
challenge. So yeah, I have to at least
No,
ask
in
the
CB9
question
with my
of, is
green
there a
card.
world where, when it's literally just double parking, is there a way to discourage people from doing that, or, to encourage them to look in places where there is space to do that?
It's tough, I think that's one of the reasons why we do protect the bike lanes. And now we have this data showing that it's one of our most powerful pedestrian safety tools. But when it started, like 15 years ago, the idea was, how do we get a bike lane that isn't parked in? Because they're always parked in, right? So it's a real challenge. And, you know, Fenimore and Rutland, west of Brooklyn Avenue, are more narrow. So there are examples of us installing protected bike lanes on streets of that width, but it's tough. I mean, to do it, you have to remove half the parking, because there's no way, right? Exactly. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
So-
makes sense. I wanted to at least ask and see,
Yeah.
is it just because we want to support for the alternate side, or if there was another reason, so I understand.
Yeah, I think the issue is that if to have a bike lane against the curb behind parked cars, you need a little more width. You need to have a buffer between the bike lane and the parking lane so that people can get out of their cars without stepping in.
Like a flat
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
So one quick thing about the PSA, you indicated that when you go out to groups and you speak to them, you try to share different things, I think you said Bike Smart or whatever that is. So I mentioned something earlier, what is it? Forest at the green and not in between. How old is that, Jeff? How old is that?
Oh, I'm 68.
Okay, how old is that? And I still know that, they had about 4 or 5 other ones that we saw on the television over and over. When you're saying that you're going out to the group, I commend you to go out to the group, but that sounds a little antiquated, especially since we're in this digital age. And I know as a community organizer, and with the church and I'm a block association, that I have to have different forms of media. I have to sometimes call people on the telephone, I have to do my flyer, I might have to do an Instagram, I have to do different things. So while I commend you for going out and talking to a group, I don't know how it's sticking, the information that you're sharing, and I don't know if there's some type of, can't say that there's a bike lesson that they have to have, but I know every time I go to a website on the phone, some kind of something pops up. So could something from DOT pop up that talks about certain safety things for us, whether it's a motorist, whether it's a bicyclist, or a regular bicyclist, or a motorized bicyclist? Because your data that you have of the 158 accidents, I'm not sure how much they're showing of the motorized bicyclists, because they say that's on the rise, and they were looking at doing something a little different for people that are using the motorized bicycles versus the pedal-driven bicycles to make it more safe, because they're finding an increase of people. Because there was one person, I can't remember, who died, and everybody thought, oh, he got hit by the car. No, he lost control of his motorized bicycle, and he ran into a car, and he just happened to hit his head, unfortunately, and he died. So I'm just wondering if there's other options, because I always want to look at what else can we do in conjunction to what you may have proposed, so that the greater community can benefit from the information that you're sharing.
Yeah, it's a great idea, and we'll definitely be bringing that back to our communications team, because they're always looking at how can they adapt the outreach they're doing to be more effective. So when we hear ideas from the community, we're looking at
Look at all this
those.
AI, I'm sure if you talk and it'll come up with a whole plan now.
ChatGPT telling you to slow down. Wait till you buy.
I mean, I like a lot of the conversation. I think it's what we're talking about is so applicable to every project or every even existing conditions. I wanted to ask specifically for this project, for the presentation tonight. Did you get a sense from the schools that you talked to what the catchment area is? How far is a student coming from, and what that travel looks like?
Yeah, yes and no. So,
Because
New
I
York-
have a follow-up.
yeah.
Okay.
There's a mix of public schools, private schools, and those kind of drop in different areas. So, yes, we talked to the schools that we've had a chance to meet with, trying to pull up the project area map. Some of the things we've heard are that, like we talked to the Albany school here, and a lot of their students are walking from farther to the west, crossing Brooklyn and Kingston. So that was one thing they talked about, is like these key crossing moments. You know, the other ones were Bedford, right? There's like some key roads that when your kid has to cross. So they kind of point out like the tough moments, I guess, is what they were sharing. The high school has a really wide catchment area. There's four or five high schools within that campus, so their catchment's from all over the city. So some of the things we looked at are transit routes, so like where's the closest train stations. Also to the west, the students walking.
Yes.
across
Do you have
the roads.
mode share breakdown by how students are getting
We
there?
unfortunately do not, and have been asking for that citywide and
Yeah.
would love to have more in-depth motor breakdown besides these anecdotal conversations with each principal.
The reason that I'm asking is because when we think about these extensions, like the
Yeah.
Rutland and Fenimore extension, or like even above Eastern Parkway, Brooklyn and Kingston also have a bike lane, but we're not making those connections. This is great here, but being a cycler on Flatbush Avenue is death defying. It really sucks. And this doesn't really, yeah.
So let me ask you a question about the,
Well, you have to,
the
if
traffic
you have
light, time.
Bedford, where am I going?
Do you know what the traffic light timing is on these corridors?
There's no way.
Yeah, this is
green
not-
lights
this is not the
versus
experience
red
of somebody who
light, the
does
red
this.
light. So if you
I'm
have a
not the
longer
most
red light,
Yeah.
it might be safe for the children to actually really take along, the time crossing and a shorter green line so that during school hours, the traffic can become slower, because you can slow it down that way as well. So you can see something like that.
Yeah, I might speak to this more, because how the signal timing works.
Yeah, you're asking if we could reduce the green time on Brooklyn and Kingston during school hours. Something we could look at, one of the challenges when you're doing this work is that you want to slow down traffic so that people can't speed. But if it's too tedious, compliance drops. Like if there's too much delay and we see it, people just say, I'm going. And that's a problem for drivers, for cyclists, and for pedestrians. And it's a really tricky thing for us to balance. So for this project specifically, we're proposing to take Brooklyn Avenue from 2 lanes down to 1. So right there, we're already reducing the capacity in some ways. And so we're, as part of that balancing, we're actually, I think, in some cases, looking to give Brooklyn Avenue a little bit more green time to make up for some of that lost space. But it's an interesting concept. I never thought about doing that before.
For hours.
Well, you don't have to slow it down to a crawl, but
Right.
it could be a good timing to allow children to cross over and you don't have to have it after school hours. There's gotta be a mechanism for a timer that allows that particular condition during school hours, and then it reverses, I guess, to.
Yeah, they do that in Europe.
They do it in Maryland, when
Yeah,
I,
they
at
do it
the stadium,
How
when I
would
used to work at Jack and
They
Cook.
do it in Boston too.
So I have a follow-up question. I see what you're trying to, you're proposing over here. So you want to change Brooklyn Avenue. Well, Kingston Avenue is already a one-way, one-lane
Right.
street. So you want to go from 2 lanes to Brooklyn Avenue after Empire that goes 1 way.
Yes.
So I was just wondering, do you have data on the volume of cars from north of Empire Boulevard versus south of Empire Boulevard?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, does the traffic actually, the volume of traffic, does it go down by 50%? Because you're removing 50% of the capacity of
That's correct.
cars being down. So I know that, Empire Boulevard, all the way up the left, even up to East New York, still is a very high density area. There's a lot of apartment buildings, so you still have probably a lot more traffic.
There's a
Later
lot of
on,
traffic. There's a lot of
further
traffic.
south,
So let me speak to that. So whenever we propose removing a lane of traffic, that's not something we take lightly. For us to be able to come up here in public and say, we want to remove a lane of traffic, for us to get the okay to do that from our bosses at DOT, we have to jump through a lot of hoops. So it's not something we take lightly. And what we do, we work with our traffic engineers and they build an area-wide or a corridor-wide traffic model. So we collect data at all the intersections, we send contractors out there to count how many people are turning, how many people are going straight, how many are cars versus trucks, different times of day. And then we look at all the signal timing and all the other characteristics, the parking turnover, pedestrian volumes. We build a traffic model of the whole corridor, and then we calibrate it so that it matches what we're seeing in the field. And then we try things. We say, what if we remove a lane? Oh, it works here, it doesn't work there. What if we change the signal timing? Oh, this is okay, this is not okay. And we go through a round and round of reviews, and all our senior engineers have to be okay with it, and they're pretty conservative. And so we looked at this in great detail, and we're confident it'll work. We don't have the volumes here to talk about specifically. I know that when you get to Empire in the evening peak period, which is the heaviest volume on Brooklyn Avenue, a about a third of the traffic turns off onto Empire. But I think even based on our preliminary look, even north of Empire, it could work in one lane. But our proposal for the moment for this project is just south of Empire.
Just to speak to that, you said you had these studies, so I actually looked at one study, I mentioned it once before. I mean, to give a prelude, I mean, over the last, since like I think Rogers, Nostra and New York probably also, since it became one lane, north and south traffic have increased, I don't know what, double, triple. You see traffic backed up now from on New York Avenue all the way down to Empire Boulevard, same thing with Rogers. Nostra's a pain in the neck to go through also.
It's air quality too.
All right, but I'm talking about traffic volume and throughput, getting cars through, up and down. The study that this was based on was Fordham Avenue. We're creating the bus lanes and all that stuff based on Fordham Avenue, and they took that example and they applied it to Rogers or all these other avenues. The only problem is that Fordham Avenue is a 4-lane avenue. So if you have on these smaller avenues, all you need is one double parked car, and it messes up the entire avenue. Plus, 10 blocks of traffic. Fordham Avenue, if you have one double parked car, you have 3 lanes to get around. So that's
So speaking of that, so you're talking about Fordham Road in the Bronx, right? So the thing with the traffic volumes is that every street is a little different and every intersection is different. That's what's so tough for us. We can't just say, we probably could remove a lane here. We have to collect data at every intersection on Brooklyn Avenue and analyze each of them on their own to make sure it'll be okay. So the traffic volumes on Nostrand might be different than the traffic volumes on Brooklyn, right? Or the traffic volumes on Kingston might be different than they are in Albany. So we can't make these big generalizations. That's why we have to get so deep in the weeds with the traffic data and the analysis. But to speak to your question about double parking, one maybe advantage of this proposed design is that for most of the corridor in Brooklyn and Kingston, there'd be a wide parking lane, wide enough that you could pretty much pull over and get out of the way of the lane. And we think we don't want to encourage double parking. You're not supposed to double park. Realistically, we know that's going to happen. So, currently, like on Brooklyn, I think Kate mentioned this earlier, with 2 lanes, if somebody double parks, you don't really see it coming, right? You're driving down the street and now you've got to swerve and change lanes and get around somebody else. But by having a wide parking lane on one side of the street, you can be in that one travel lane and should have a better, should be more reliable as a functioning lane. But I hear you. It's when you're on a really wide road like Fordham Road, or like Eastern Parkway, there's more flexibility for bad behavior.
I was just saying that the study on Fordham Road didn't adequately picture, even though it was used as an example to make the changes on Rogers, Nostra, and New York. So I was saying that the study wasn't a good.
So it was like a cookie cutter, you're
comparison.
saying.
But they used one situation which was totally different and applied it to
But this model is also modeled after a program in the Bronx, correct?
No. This is a model of we were looking at Brooklyn and Kingston Avenues. When we propose removing a lane from Brooklyn Avenue, we collect data on Brooklyn Avenue. We do observations there.
I did show an example project
Right.
in Manhattan that used the same tools, and we think that it shows kind of like what does this toolkit look like together, and that it had a big safety benefit because it had similar conditions. So yes, the use of the toolkit is comparable, but all the traffic modeling is independently done on this corridor based on the data. So we didn't take the model from that project,
So
the
what about
traffic data
What about
model.
109th Street? You say that the same tools are applied to the Bronx, 109th Street, and you're trying to apply it on this project as well.
Well, yeah, the tools we have, they don't change by borough, right? So something and we use our tools in all the boroughs and all the neighborhoods. So we've installed protected bike lane, pretty similar to this proposal. I think well, maybe not in Staten Island, but in every other borough, many projects.
You know what my concern is? You have all these schools, and you have parents. What do parents do with their children? They drive. They drive everybody to school. There's a lot of traffic,
lot of
there's the
traffic.
buses, there's the parents coming to drop off their children. You have a lot of traffic during that time period. And now you're basically reducing like 50%, that's a lot.
And more parents drive because it's not safe.
Like,
But if you make it safer.
parents, not everybody are bikers.
Not everyone could drive.
And the buses
Not
are
not
terrible.
everybody, I'm only talking, can I just speak, please?
Sorry.
Can I do that? Can I do that? I didn't interrupt you when you were speaking. So it would be nice to have the same respect. So my concern is that you have all of that happening, and then you're going to put a bike lane. You feel like you need to have a bike lane on both avenues. I'm not sure why you feel like there need to be 2 bike lanes on both avenues. But you're going to put bike lanes on there, and you're still not talking about the increased traffic of motorized vehicles that, the 2-wheeler motorized vehicles that are also will be now coming down. Because you're inviting them by having a bike lane, you're inviting them. So you have all of this stuff going on, you're reducing the traffic volume. You have parents who are still gonna come and drop off their children and pick up their children and that always happens around schools. You're still gonna have all the buses coming, you're still gonna have the regular people trying to drive through the neighborhood. Then you are now welcoming motorized vehicles that will be coming down the bike lanes. And you're telling us that this is supposed to be a safer environment. Like, things are just gonna be safer. You also, I would like to see the data about the motorized vehicles, because you claim that you have it. Can I please have some documentation about these bike lanes from, what was the data from 2024, 23? 2022.
Oh, that's the older New Yorkers stuff.
No, I'm talking about the data about having these bike lanes.
2017.
The one that you gave us for 217, I would like the updated.
We'll provide you the updated data.
Who's we?
We DOT.
DOT will give it to the board and it'll provide it for you.
Okay, Dante, I'll be looking for
I
it.
know.
You know me, I'll play. Okay, when do you think you might be able to give that?
Available today. It's publicly
I
available.
will send it.
It's-
Again, can I just speak? I'm talking to them, thank you. When?
We'll provide you a link to the report tomorrow.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. How much faster or slower do you expect Brooklyn and things to happen to be after you make these changes?
It's a hard thing to put one stamp on because there's not one speed on these
I was
roads.
just in general.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah, yeah.
5% slower, 10-20% faster. Generally.
Yeah, I can't make it, it's hard to make a generalization about it. And we've reduced, crossing distances and narrowed streets, but often in different ways. And those streets might have different volumes and different characteristics and different neighborhoods. What I will say is that if it were to go in, we will go in and check its effectiveness afterwards. And if speeding had gone down but not enough, we would look into additional measures.
Okay, because one objection people might be having is they expected to get about maybe 40-50% slower than they right. And that might not be the case right now. And that's one of the reasons why people might be a bit slow to get into it, because they're like, oh, you're gonna do it first and then see if it works after. It's kind of like in some minds putting the cart before the horse. So some people want to know, how much faster or slower could this kind of project have, what kind of impact
Yeah, yeah.
speed will have on us.
So maybe like some examples.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
What's the timeline for the project?
So as I said before, we're going through outreach with a lot of stakeholders. This is again about public outreach. There's more to come. And there were suggestions of people, I didn't get specific suggestions, but some people saying there are certain people you should talk to. So maybe the board, you gather some stakeholders you think would be useful. We could try to reach out to them, so that'd be appreciated. So that'll be happening this summer. And then from there, like I said, we'll be digesting this, and then whatever we get from that, we can get back to you.
One quick question as well on the outreach point. I've noticed the DOT has done surveys on other projects before. The Cove Road project, we've had survey boxes, which form the scanner, for the announcers. Do you have any plans to do that for this? Because we expect people are gonna want to give some thoughts or changes or just suggestions on this kind of project.
Yeah, not that we have planned on it, but it's something we can consider now we heard it from you.
Do
So.
people even read those? I mean, I filled that out, nobody ever got back to me.
Yes, we do. They're read and collated,
I
absolutely.
wrote a long essay about them.
Do you do those interactive maps for projects like this, where like the truck map, the truck redesign, where you can like?
We do for some, but not for others, but we'll consider it for this project if we're interested. We were not planning on it, but we will look into it.
Or you're talking about
The one you like.
what was that?
Yeah, where you drop the pin with the
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And did for the studies and the analysis that you've done to this point, can you tell us a little bit about the methodology? It seems like we're all curious about it. Was it just vehicle mileage traveled? Was it just an overall level of service? How are you looking to measure improvements?
In terms of the traffic capacity?
What was your traffic model?
The traffic model uses a software called Synchro.
Okay.
It's kind of standard industry software, and the big metrics we look at are average delay per vehicle,
Okay.
volume to capacity ratio, which is basically the
Vehicles are all road users.
just vehicles. That's what it gives us, right? So definitely, pedestrian delay is not calculated using the software. Cyclist delay, bus rider delay. There are buses here, but you know.
No bus on Empire.
That's true. So yeah, so the big outputs are average delay per vehicle, volume to capacity ratio, which is like what percent full the street is, and then the 95th percentile queue lengths. We're anxious about queues because if a vehicle queue backs up to the next intersection, they can block the box. So we're careful about that.
Yeah. So it could totally be feasible that by reducing crossing times for most people where we live who walk, you know, if it's less than a mile or less than a half a mile, like you could actually be really increasing throughput. I would really like to see DOT for this and future studies look at a broader level of service provided rather than DOT. That's my personal advice.
Right, so, has emergency vehicles been considered in your analysis?
Absolutely. So the thing with the emergency vehicles here, one, they should be able to fit because the traffic should be flowing. But if they can't because it's backed up for whatever reason, somebody's double parked, somebody left their car in the middle of the street, they can go down the bike lane. Which sounds crazy, but we've seen it. We've been telling the firehouses for 15 years, yes, go down the bike lane. It's 11 feet wide, you can fit in there, and they do. We've seen streets that are backed up, for whatever reason, and then they just and go into the bike lane, and cyclists have to get out of the way. It's not such a great experience, but they can get to their destination.
As part of our outreach, we reach out to NYPD, the fire department, and sanitation. We get their feedback on it and how it impacts our operations. So we talk to all of them, and also go ahead. Sanitation and fire department.
There is an ambulance berth on Winthrop.
Yeah, EMS is part of
They
the fire
fire a lot of the
department.
ambulances for the hospital complex.
And what about the folks from Access Around that
Yeah.
have to drop off and pick up seniors along the way?
Is this right?
Access Around.
We don't, yes, that's right. I don't know if we speak to them particularly. I mean, obviously we speak to MTA for any impacts, for any project impacts on them.
We also notify the mayor's office of people with disabilities,
Yeah.
so sometimes look for reviews on issues like that.
That's right.
And then we generally, in speaking with the schools and others, are just looking at loading behavior. So again, like part of the extra parking strike was being aware of some of the loading behavior on the street, and where can vehicles pull to the curb. So that is something we're thinking about and flagging for some of the operational agencies. But it's an important thing to know, bringing it up.
Is that plan B where the emergency vehicles would go down the bike lane? Something new, or was it built into the plan on Parkside Avenue? Because we've sat and had meetings about that issue, about Parkside, when the protected bike lane went on Parkside between Ocean and Prospect Park Southwest. And that to this day continues to be a bottleneck for most of them. Depending on what time
Yes.
It's really bad.
you hit Parkside, you know, I budget time, so I know if I'm gonna go Parkside, it's just for that
Yes.
stretch.
Yes.
But I've often felt that if I was in an ambulance on my way to Maimonides or to Methodist, if we had to go around that side, we're probably not gonna, right? But what you just said, keeping it real, right?
Yeah.
But what you just said, I'm like, really? So would that bike lane accommodate an ambulance?
It
Is
should.
that
I mean,
inside?
so what I'm not that.
Should?
That one has some curves in it.
There's some funny stuff on Parkside near Ocean and near near Park Circle, where I think near Ocean, this is way out of scope, but it's a little bit tighter. I think it's less than 11 feet, and there's no parking there. There's like there's bollards. It's like the design was a little weird to accommodate the left turn lane for people going to Ocean. And I think when you get to Park Circle, they have to go on the sidewalk because there's two turn lanes going on. So it's
Yeah,
it's
I did
inconsistent.
notice that bike lane kind of is painted up onto the sidewalk at the circle.
Yeah, so that one has those pinch points.
It's also that there's a truck lane on Caton, like a truck route, and the trucks often go on Parkside, and that's what creates that bottleneck. It happens a lot. I took that route by the way I took my kids to school, where the scoop out was, and I drove her often because it was unsafe. I really wanted to bike with her, but it was before that lane, and then that lane was put in, and a woman riding with her instructor kid was killed there by a truck that wasn't supposed to be there. And trucks continue to go there and not on Caton where they're supposed to be on the truck route. So that's not enforced over there. That's one of the problems that creates that bottleneck. And it would be good if the emergency vehicles could, if you could fix that, because I know they can't now.
The emergency vehicles cannot go.
In that bike
In
lane. No,
that one.
it's weird.
Both
It's
sides.
the way it is.
Pinch on both sides, you can't do it.
They can, it's too narrow.
It's
But,
like,
yeah, is that something
It's
that
not
can
one-
be, I know that wasn't the purpose of this meeting, but you mentioned it, and
Well,
it
not
has
the
been a
board, but-
concern that this committee has, we've questioned in the past. So if there's a solution, we certainly would like the record to reflect that whatever alterations are needed should be put in place. It should be high priority that the ambulance be able to navigate from Ocean across Park to Park Circle.
Yeah, but how would they do that, Jeff? Because they
They
would have
would,
to.
it was
These are the experts.
They would have to, because the bike lane is here, the cars are parked over here. You will have to eliminate that entire section of cars. There will be nowhere to put those cars. They will have to.
Wait, we're talking about for the ambulance to.
Wait a minute, because this is important, okay? I think that it's important because we have to make sure that we don't have the same problem that we have on Parkside. Okay, even though these streets are wider, you can still run into, because they're gonna narrow the streets, and you have to be certain that we're not gonna have that problem over there, because people's life will be in danger. So as long as they actually are convinced that there's not gonna be a problem with emergency vehicles moving through this area, this is what we need to talk about. Not that it's off topic.
It's
not off
relevant.
topic. It's
Yeah.
very relevant.
It is, Ethan, it's definitely relevant, because if this is more difficult to fix and you can fix this, everything else will be a piece of cake, right?
Right. Well, Parkside is a very different beast. It's, one of the, and I know it's still in the same district, completely different traffic volumes. It's a pinch point in the road network. There's so few ways to get east-west, south of the park, right? The Caton, Church, they're all really tight. Whereas Brooklyn and Kingston, south of Empire, are very low volume. There's very little traffic on this section. Very different from Parkside. And we don't have the same challenges there. And it's hard to talk about without an aerial photo to really get into it, but at Parkside and Ocean, there's some really specific signal phasing there where there's overlapping turns happening. And it was a huge benefit, I think, when that went in. I didn't work on it, but getting those protected turn phases in, a really heavy turn from Parkside onto Ocean, from Ocean on the Parkside. And if you're gonna keep those turn lanes there for those turn phases, then we will still have that pinch point at the bike lane at Ocean. But there's nothing like that on this, on these two streets in this part of them.
We wanted those terms. There was a long-term effort actually with this board and Council Eugene time. There was a long effort for those, and we want those. So, yep, exactly.
On that topic,
Many of you were there.
on the topic of ambulances, I'm actually curious. I don't think there was a slide for Winthrop, what that would look like, but I know the hospital's right there. There's ambulances, and, you know, to make this that ring around the Wingate that we're trying to do. Just
So the
curious.
thing, I think the thing with Winthrop and Rutland is that they both widen for this one block, right?
Oh, okay.
So Rutland Road is 30 feet wide, and then for this one block it widens to 40 feet. So it's sort of the same purpose of narrowing those streets. It's suddenly become wide. You know, it's kind of heartbreaking. You can imagine when this was being built at the time, they thought, well, widen these streets and that'll be better. And now we know that that means, you know, longer crossing distances and more speeding. So,
Back then they had horses and buggies.
you're exactly.
But going back
In the budget.
to her question, the hospital is going. We have not spoken to them. That's going to be one of our big stakeholder outreach.
And
to
there's
talk
some big
about their
changes
operations.
happening as well. The
Yes,
hospital,
yes, yes.
and vital work
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
That's
Now,
fast. That sounds like Troy.
So, let's have one last round of
Further down.
questions
Yeah.
before we look to move ahead.
Well, this,
Albany.
Yeah,
this
that's why I'm
is,
trying to make sure
this is
the
about
questions can be good.
MTA, the buses, 41. I know I'm changing up a little bit, but still saying Main Street here. Whereas on Eastern Parkway, Flatbush, that corner of Prospect Park, where you have that net down, what you call it, or little island, where you make it safe to make that turn. So the buses have a lot of accidents there. A truck fell over, you get the piece of it, and I ride on these buses, they always complain about this extension to make it safe for the bikes to go around, but it's too extended out that the bus goes into traffic, and that's towards where the library is. It goes right into traffic, and then the cars, you know, it's a lot of accidents right there. We had a lot of police reports on that. Okay, so maybe you can consider in, you know, preventing the buses from getting busted tires or breaking down in the back or a truck being turned over, or a cyclist get hit, or pedestrians walking, all of these.
Wait, I think there's a Grand Army Plaza reconstruction
Oh,
presentation
no,
like
that's-
next week,
Oh,
Okay.
right?
Where?
MTA.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Not that,
Yeah.
yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
There's
That'd be great.
multiple,
That would be good for that.
multiple.
Right.
Oh,
MTA,
there
don't
was one a
complain.
couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can talk to MTA operations, bus operations about that. I haven't heard about that, but I will talk to them. I didn't know that.
Yes, 'cause I give out information pertaining to food and whatnot, and they said, wait a minute, let me talk to you. And that's what they told me.
Yeah, I can only speak to our project area, but we have a software called AutoTurn that mimics vehicles and we can set different turning speeds and model them turning around all of these proposals, and we do that for every single movement, every single intersection. And it not only shows where the vehicle is, but a like 2-foot buffer around them, right, like wiggle space on each side. So that's something we're doing for all the FDY and EMS vehicles, as well as any MTA bus crossings, as well as school buses, you know, like et cetera, et
Trucks and
cetera.
things like that, and
So-
and trucks.
Yes.
Cause
Trucks
they
are part
too
of
go into traffic.
We have
and,
SU-30 trucks on every single turn we model, and so, you know, if you get into the weeds of the engineering drawing, every little curve extension is like inches different, you know, they're all specified based on this turning analysis.
Keep in
Because you're
mind-
exactly right, every turn is different, it depends on what's on the other side of the street, the angle that they're approaching at, like it's a beast.
So there's an island there too that the cars and buses almost go into, you know, that everyone stands there.
Yeah, across there.
This might pitch.
Alright. If no more urgent questions, I think we'll move.
I have one last question.
Yep.
So I didn't see anything in the presentation regarding signage. So like, if that could be in the follow-up presentation, so people can actually see what the new signage will be, right? I think that would be helpful.
There's not a whole lot of signage changes. I mean, the main thing is we speak with the schools about their loading zones to make sure that if they need school loading or need to rearrange their school loading for kind of the dropping off, we talk to our parents or other kids. We want to make sure that their loading zone makes sense, it's on side of the building that makes sense. So there might be some signage there, but I think that's the only big
Definitely
like
just wanna
curb
make
rate
sure
changes,
that
and
signage
we'll
is
flag
done,
them.
because if people start to get tickets, I'll be the one getting those calls.
Absolutely.
So like,
That's right.
Yeah.
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 On the signage front, I think it'd also be wise, like if you're building these things, you want people to use them, that I think it'd be easy for someone to be on Eastern York Avenue, not know, hey, there's no safe route to get to Wingate Park or something like that. I know, I don't know if any in CB9, but actually there's one on Maple, when you're making the left from Maple onto Utica. There's like a best route east, and it's like a little wiggle that you have to do, but I think it's a little detailed that those wayfinding signage. The wayfinding is really helpful, I think, for new cyclists, and I imagine you're gonna have a lot of kids from the schools, like riding to school maybe or something like that, so.
Thanks for flagging, yeah, we'll make sure that
so-
bike route signage is part of that consideration.
Just another consideration for the students is I know my experience that there's never enough bike racks. The particular school that I was talking about, 839, they did have a little room for bikes, but it was so many kids brought their bikes and their scooter and their little things that it was overflowing, and they had to shut it down because it wasn't fair. And they didn't have enough bike racks outside. The kids were locked through the fence. A lot of people want to use these. So is there any plan to insert more bike racks, and not just for bikes, but for all those little devices around the city? Because it's definitely lacking. Like, I feel like I can't go anywhere. People can't park on my street. I can't go anywhere and lock my bike up because there's nowhere to lock it. There's nothing. And I feel like the city bikes are taking over all these city bikes. I don't want it to be city bike. I want to take my own bike. I like my bike. And I want to park it, and I want to go to the store. I want to go to the doctor. I want a place to park it. And DOT is not putting those racks in anywhere. There's very few and far between.
Yeah,
So what's up with that?
Yeah, we can definitely look at bike racks, especially on the school frontages in this neighborhood. That makes a lot of sense. And then maybe do a broader look at where might bike racks be a part of this project throughout the neighborhood. Touch points, not just at school. I think that's a great flag.
We need them everywhere in the whole
Since
city.
we're talking about bike racks, she's finished.
Go ahead. I know what you're gonna say.
The Major Owen Center.
Yes.
You were nice enough to put, I think, 4 little circle type of bike racks. I think it's different from the bike racks back in my day. And one of them was vandalized, I guess, and it was taken off, so I don't know how I can get it replaced.
Those brown ones.
Do you like the brown ones?
Those brown ones are so good because you can't put that many bikes to them. They're
Right.
crappy and they're easy to take off for some reason.
I like the ones that's individually that you slide, you know.
You kind of just slide into it, kind of.
Yes.
Those little round, they're not enough. You know, they need more bike racks. Major Owens has a lot of kids there.
Yes,
A lot of
that's
people
why
come.
I like.
I would love to ride my bike and park there. I live pretty close, but it's uphill.
So is there?
Maybe
There's
it was just
nowhere.
4 for that big facility, and I don't know if they put some on the side, so I don't know.
Bring it to my attention.
I used to have a number, but now we don't have, I don't have no money. It's switched up and stuff, cause I was like, okay. She makes me laugh. But seriously though, if we could, cause I don't know who's actually taking notes here. Okay. Yeah, Major Owen Center.
Yeah, I take my niece swimming every Sunday, and I'm with you.
Okay, I'm the community outreach coordinator, so come look for you.
All right.
What's your name again?
Kate.
Kate what?
Kate Graham.
Kate Graham?
Yes, we swim on Sunday afternoon.
Okay, great, Kate, okay. Graham or Graham?
Graham like the cracker.
Okay.
Let's get some bike racks around the city. Come on. What's happening?
We'll tell you 200.
I mean,
Can
people
you
are
put
locking
those
to
in
the
the
DOT
lanes?
poles,
Or
and
in
it's
the-
illegal, and then they're getting their bikes broken, stolen.
Correct.
People get mad.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to park.
I have an unrelated question. Regarding delayed green, for walk sign. I was wondering, is there some kind of an algorithm you use for the timing, or how long the delayed green is?
On the like LPI, leading pedestrian. interval
Right.
timing.
Because
7 seconds is the minimum. So usually they're 7 to 10 seconds. We've been elongating some of them to 10 seconds. Occasionally you see a weird one that's longer, but
Alright.
usually 7 to 10.
I mean, personal experience. I know that there's one on Brooklyn Avenue on Union Street. And I think I can walk back and forth the street 4 times before that thing turns.
Oh, really?
I mean, and the problem is that because nobody wants to wait that long, you end up having to look at the light while you're walking to make sure it's not switching while you're walking across. So it actually causes more problems than it fixes.
Yeah, this is one of the challenges with delay, that if it gets too high, you get no
Nobody's gonna comply with this, it's just gonna go.
All the sweet spots.
Yeah, I know, that's true.
Thank you all, and genuinely, thank you for your feedback and the things that you raised. It means a lot to us, and we'll be digging into it, so thank you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming by.
What would be the best way to get additional feedback to you if you have any?
Send to me. Send to me and Diana.
Gotcha.
We haven't taken it.
So,
Funny thing is not even. We still have one to do. These usually take my most. There's questions in like 10 minutes.
Oh, they're Washington. Yeah, we have a capital project that's gonna take classes up there. I don't know about further down. You're probably talking about further down. Yeah, just send me an email.
Not under. It's about feedback. All the feedback is really valuable because there's always things we can be changing.
Pleasure, nice to meet you. Thank you.
Good. Thank you for coming out and sharing with us the information.
Yes, I love like it's
what are the community groups that are over at?
Remember,
Over at what are the community groups? I know that's popular. What are the ones right here?
I just thought they
Here, but here,
Friends of Wingate Park. Oh, I know. Yeah, Friends of Wingate Park, right? So I'll reach out to her.
No, she's not active. She hasn't been active.
Yeah, but it's like still beautiful.
We haven't received maybe a daycare.
Is there any block associations?
I'm sure they are. Yeah, I can look through the SAP. I have the list of SAPOs. Yeah, I can look through it.
Can you get me?
I can take a look through.
And I think that'll be the right.
Are you allowed
The
to
magic
do-
combo.
So let me.
I can let you know who they are.
Okay. Because I just think that's important for, they know what's coming because they're the ones that are going
to get that within the eyes of the people that would be able to have more meaningful thoughts about it. Yeah, of course. Synchro? Yeah.
Alright, so,
Oh, yes. I feel like all of us, anyone
Jeff is gone.
Oh, wait, do we need a quorum?
And I gotta go too.
Say goodbye.
We have enough people to make a quorum, and that's a little bit of vote.
You're gonna vote on anything?
It's much more impressive.
But if Jeff left, I think there's like one.
It's quite,
I
you
think
can
we
get
only
quite
have
good
six. So Jeff's right there, but I think he's. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so someone called Synchro.
It was way more detailed.
She's on vacation.
That's why. You can just. No, because
Got some years left.
Yeah, we do this really working turnover too, so how long does it take you from parks?
Thank you very much.
Parks and walks traffic, so yeah, that's part of Synchro.
That was
And that's
way
really
more
where, even
detailed.
the data we get, we never see the data. We have teams that have been sitting outside for months, different weather, some rough weather. So we try to make sure picture like the data and reality. Because sometimes it's like,
Plenty of
oh, this is all this
conversations that
fault,
are
but it's just only 80 cars an hour, that doesn't make sense. And then of course it's because behavior is double
We-
parking, you know, so
we-
you try to make sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would need to make
no,
sure
I
it's
can
big,
look it
like,
up.
geometric, but
Thank
it's
you.
still
The teacher, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for flagging,
Share
thanks
the
for your
application
questions.
committee, I think she would be particular.
Some city is not
She's
sure
a
it's good,
strong
it's getting
supporter.
better.
I can say that of all the ELs we talked to, she's a strong supporter.
Right, so thank you for the
I was also
young
gonna
lady, is what
So
is that?
not
That's my niece.
particularly,
Yeah,
I
she's
did
sick.
say
She's
capital project
okay.
that's so much doing the real thing. There's
Thank
several
you, thanks
safe
for
routes
having
to
us, thanks for
school
your
funds.
questions.
Does she got a bike? Do you ride your bike up there?
25 to 29.
She's like surprised, I'm
Crazy,
nervous
crazy,
too.
crazy
I'm one of those people that's
Or
like.
is there any way that we can capitalize on that? So is it that we
I
can
don't
the
know.
multi-millions that are dedicated for
I'm up
construction
against it.
capital?
I own a car, but I
Are you able to
drive
speak
most
to
of
that?
the time, just depends on how far I'm
I mean,
going.
I don't know.
Okay.
It's possible.
Yeah, so it's a block.
It's around corridors that have already been redesigned, like East New York Leopard, so that crazy triangle. There are safe routes to schools that are allocated on Troy, for example, or on Brooklyn. So I'm curious what that money is
That's it, 20 minutes. I think we already have capital projects for all of them. Like we had a whole, we have a whole program, and I think those capital projects are already there. Yeah, it's like using multi-sites and overall 5 boroughs, so like a Brooklyn, Staten Island, and contracting.
Oh,
Oh, no, if you're talking about safe routes to school, it's capital. Plus the girls are working down there.
So there would be, we should expect that future capital investments from the safe routes to school funding that's starting in 2025.
She's not a light, you're almost right there.
I
It's not that hard.
I wish I was thinking, 6,000 employees, 12,000, from like 12,000.
We take every other year. Now, what is it? Is it that it's intentionally whatever she needs to see material to be used so that the salt gets there and you get up so you can come back?
Yeah, I would do it here.
Really? Does that so say okay?
No, not yet, but like if that, you know, there's a big question. I have a lot of the same, I don't get the answers, that's all I can say, it's not working, I can't figure it out now, but.
Bring it up and to share. We appreciate you coming out and working
Yeah,
and
of
stuff.
So this still has.
Everyone's like, sure, the whole
I'm gonna say to everyone, because I had a brain injury, so I had to walk, and I feel that sometimes it took me 2 stoplights to get across Empire Boulevard. Okay.
Yeah, but this is.
All right.
It was nice chatting with you.
Thank you. Okay, Carolyn.
That's all that way that I'm making
I
it
got
up.
you. Now,
I thought I recorded it, 311, but maybe I didn't. Yeah, if it's still listed, that's.
it's gone.
That's half the fixing, then you gotta dig it out.
Someone took it out. Someone took it out.
Big bolt thing.
And I was looking at this, I was like.
I know, it's like the smallest, the biggest here. But they wouldn't really, they have a variance, but I guess it has to do with, buses. It's like, no, buses come all the time, and all of their cities stuck behind bikes. But if the bus comes like every 2 minutes, it's not so bad. But when buses come every 2 minutes, they tend to not have
Noticed
buses.
that the right way was kind of shaky.
Good
Way more detailed than the discussion. Wonderful. A lot of attention to all the school.
Bobby has one.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Do you actually think? Committee members are taking it. No, it's a different one. This is the new sky.
Nightmare, undefined, actually,
Yes.
probably shouldn't matter.
Okay. Concrete dominary?
That's
Stand up there.
Yes.
Stand right here.
Oh.
That's the right number. All right, cool. So, let's gather real quick and vote on this.
Alright.
So this is
You
just
have
split
enough
up from the
people?
original, right?
Huh?
You have enough people?
Yeah, we got 6 of us.
This is just
Three.
this is split up from the original.
Yeah.
Same wording as last year.
Okay.
A few changes, small things.
Okay.
Alright, so yeah, so from May, we had one resolution that went to the full board, which is the design guidelines, got sent back essentially. So what we did so far that I want us, to vote on, we split design guidelines into 2 separate recommendations. Standard is now just gonna cover things like city bikes, things like, shared transportation. So in future, it'll ideally cover, maybe scooters as well if they appear here, right? It's essentially this framework for how far they're placed, right? I'm sure y'all probably remember. The cars essentially would be limited to 3 per mile radius, so they don't get too crowded and take as much parking. And the others, city bikes.
What was it limited to?
Huh?
What did you say it was limited to?
3 per quarter mile radius, right? And we have a few other provisions in here just to.
You're looking at the standard.
Yeah, this is shared guidelines. Yeah.
You call it a stand?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an acronym.
Shared.
Yeah. So yeah, city bike stations, we exercise a preference to have them on the sidewalks and some of the streets, which as we heard today, DOT already kind of does try to do, but it's just to underscore that some more. So this is generally unchanged from the version it was before. I'm gonna call for a vote to approve this so we can bring it to full board in June. Any against? No? Alright. Alright, so this passes. Now for the bike network, this one, huh?
Format question.
Yeah.
Never mind, my digital staple. The wrong order.
Yikes.
Alright.
That makes sense. Okay. It's okay, okay. The bike network, it was split out. It covered 2 main areas. The Lincoln Road section between Flatbush Avenue and Ocean Avenue. And the bike lane network they're proposing tonight around Wingate Park. Since they're proposing this now, and they already have plans for it, and they're planning to get feedback on this, it would make sense for us to strike this out for now, and bring it back perhaps when they have a more finalized version that they want to build, and before we give an opinion on it, that's official.
Well,
Alright,
would
so-
we even need to, would we need to do anything of what we have done, although we have done work on this, but isn't this kind of a moot point now that we should just be, they should take our feedback and represent this and then.
Right, yeah, so I mean, we could also do that, but we already have an agreement here to do that, so we might not need to express it in writing. Just to add on to that, we might also want to express other concerns when they come back, considering like the leftwards part, we might want to have that start end there as opposed to Empire Boulevard, because it's still kind of narrow between those two streets. And we want to acknowledge that. So, but for now, I'm proposing we strike out the bike lane section for the Wingate cluster entirely for now, and just leave it to the Lincoln Road section that was in here originally. And a bit of the wording was changed in this one. It was changed, instead of more of a call for a design, it's now a bit softer and asks DOT to submit a proposal.
So that's just all of number 1, right? It's gone, and now we're just looking at number 2, the Lincoln Road section.
Yes, all of number 1 is gone in the potential plans, right? And in number 2, we keep the Lincoln Road section.
Why do you keep it in here then? We're not.
No, because that was a change that was made before.
We didn't know this.
We split it. Yeah, this was done before tonight.
Okay, so
So
you want to you're reintroducing this?
No, we want to kill this.
We're gonna kill this for now.
Can we,
Okay, so we're
Yeah.
voting now.
are we asking for them
We'd be
to?
voting
Just on.
I would like in writing, we should have them represent
That's what. Okay.
plus signage plus. other
Okay, so you're proposing.
things.
So right, so we have a proposal from Andrew to
Oh,
add.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Say that again,
That's what
babe?
we were saying, I'll make that.
Yeah, we're striking out that Wingate section, and as Andrew suggested, we can also add in a request for them to represent that part. Now, the language in this part is actually a bit softer. It asks DOT to present a proposal on. Yeah. Yeah, you got the stand.
Okay.
Yeah, the bike lane, right? Yeah.
Proposal for the Lincoln.
Yeah, it'll leave that in, right? So we have a few things on the floor right now. Andrew proposed that we keeping the bike network of Wingate section of it, but ask DOT to represent it.
Oh, you can have the specifics, just that like, we would like a more refined proposal that accounts for things discussed at the June
Okay.
2023 meeting, or 24.
Let's go for a vote on that by itself. You have any against that?
Say it again now?
So we're gonna cut the potential bike lane presented in our district around Wingate Park, because
Number one.
they just presented
Okay,
that.
so we're gonna.
And
Yeah.
replace that with language like, we want DOT to come back and give us their updated plan once they've gotten feedback over the course of the
Yes.
summer.
Where exactly does the bike lane on Lincoln Road go?
To the park.
To the park between.
No, but where
it would
exactly
it
on
would
that road?
begin where in the road?
Because there is a bike lane on Lincoln Road, it ends right on Mary Pickett and Flatbush, it ends
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
So where are you proposing the bike lane?
It would be a two-way bike lane that would fit on the street. Currently, the street is reported to be 80 feet wide, which
No,
isn't
no.
enough space.
You're not getting it.
Yeah.
Flatbush, Ocean,
Yeah.
where exactly in that
Between. You mean like in the road?
in that span, Flatbush, Ocean?
Just there.
So, to,
Just, I don't understand.
to relieve vehicular
There's a map behind
congestion,
it.
we support converting this portion of Lincoln Road to a westbound one-way.
So it's
But
Lincoln Road.
where would the buses go?
The buses
They
will
would
change.
stay there.
The buses
The
would
buses
stay
will
there.
make a right turn on Lincoln.
Yeah.
But where would the bike lane go?
It would go on the other side of the
Or the
street.
south side.
The
So you
west and south
propose to
side.
eliminate the whole parking section over there?
No.
No, it'll keep both parking lanes. It has enough space for two parking lanes, a bus lane, a bike lane, and a traffic lane.
Converting the street to one way,
Instead of being
westbound.
two-way, cause now it's two ways.
It's
No,
making-
it's only one way.
No,
One
no.
way going and one way coming.
Well, yes, but
Well,
Lincoln
yes.
Road, the rest of the way is just.
And also just to give you a little clarity there too, the north side of that street, there is no parking from most of that block, because it's a bus stop.
It's
You
3
can-
bus stops.
You can convert that into a bus lane and have the bus lane end early, so we preserve the parking on that side of the corner of Ocean.
I can't visualize that.
I can show it to you.
So, because I know that block and I just don't see how.
It would, instead of this being a moving lane this way, because you can't go any further than this block. Like the park's there, you're coming this way, then you have to turn either up or down.
You can make the right or left,
Right,
from
right.
here.
Right, but you can't go straight, right?
You
So-
can go straight. You
No,
can go,
no,
s-
no.
from here you can go straight.
You can. Lincoln Road.
Only one way.
Westbound.
You can.
Becomes a
Well, I
one-way
live
in the
on the street.
direction.
What is that,
Well, westbound.
Okay.
Past Flatbush.
One second.
For that two
Going
ways.
this way.
Right, but then you
You
have
can
to
go-
turn right or left.
But you can go straight and make a left right here.
You can't go
North
straight
Lincoln,
and make a left, you
Washington
can just make a left.
Right here, we can
You-
go straight.
No, you are
There's
not
no-
allowed to
not
do that.
allowed to.
You're not
There's
supposed to
left
do
onto
that.
Washington. That's, some people do it.
That's
but
illegal.
Still do it, yeah.
That's
That's illegal.
illegal. And,
And that problem would also be avoided by making it one-way westbound.
right, all traffic is coming this way.
No, all
now.
traffic is coming
I
this way.
So-
I don't even know, I can't approach from.
One second, Paco, guys, can we,
And then what was the
we should probably vote before we discuss this right now, considering we're trying to go on.
On which one?
Andrew's initial,
For DOT
motion was for
represent.
DOT to represent.
Right.
Do we have a vote on that? Is that approved?
I would second that.
Yes.
Okay.
DOT to represent with our feedback in there.
Okay,
Yes.
now, so that's gonna partially invalidate the striking of the bike lane part, the Wingate section, but it'll be vague.
No, strike that, because we're not asking them to propose
Right,
anything, we're
right.
asking them to update us in any
Update
future
us.
planning.
So that's the replacement for that part. Now, the second proposal we're looking to do is just keeping the Lincoln Road section. And I want to make a small correction to the text. Instead of asking to present 2 to 3 proposals, we could probably ask for 1 to 2 perhaps.
Which letter said?
It's in the first resolution section of the recommendation. There we go.
Oh, to present
How many
to-
ways to
no.
solve this problem can there be already?
It's only
Sure,
one street.
perhaps. It depends. Like some might have a one-way bike lane, a two-way. It could be a whole different thing. But we can ask for one proposal and then maybe make changes to it in the future. So there's no real reason to ask for 2 plus. So one's fine. So 8 proposal on that.
Fine.
Yeah, 1 is fine. So this is not approved. Do you have a vote here?
Wait, say it again?
So On the first page.
Yeah. On the
In
first page?
Yeah, in the section where the resolution begins,
Oh,
there's a request for DOT to submit 2 to 3 proposals for the Lincoln Road fix.
okay,
But we're gonna whittle that down to 1,
okay.
so that it's not, redundant, and since we can make changes to a given proposal. from
Okay,
that.
okay, okay, so this will make 1.
And then,
They're not.
are we gonna vote on that?
Okay.
Yeah,
Do we have
right
to
now, it's
vote?
just,
Do we have to vote on that change?
Hmm?
Do we have to vote on that change?
we are. You have any against that? No, all for it. Okay, cool.
I mean, for the last section, the last be it resolved, where we talked about general things.
Yes.
You wanna try to include, like, we would support DOT doing a PSA campaign where.
Yes, of course.
Department
DOT,
of
the thing
Education-
about this, a lot of the opposition to any of these
Slip that
comes
in.
from feedback, like have you gotten feedback from these people? And we are not necessarily as equipped as DOT to get feedback from the public.
Of course.
We're equipped to like see problems and find ways to fix them, but we're not gonna survey 10,000 people and figure out what they want, And it's also too early for us to do that. It's better to have DOT working on it or ready to work on it and then ask. We're supposed to ask at the beginning. So yeah, we can do that too.
I mean, I'm dubious about the effectiveness of PSAs. I think enforcement is the only way.
I agree with
Yeah,
that.
bullets 1, 2, and 3 are done.
Yeah, people will do what they want at the end of the day.
I
But
mean, I
that's
know,
also NYPD. We
right,
can't-
well,
We can make a motion for NYPD to do something,
I
but
think,
I
this
think-
is to DOT.
I think Benny's also like talking about the speed bumps and like the behavioral changes
for
on the road.
cars or for bikes?
For cars, but
Okay.
yeah, I
But
mean
I thought
enforcement for bikes is
I
pretty
thought
good.
this was talking about bikes. Yeah, the cars were.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I mean, I know as a kid, or even up until maybe COVID, I would be scared to ride a bike on the sidewalk because I'd get a ticket.
Yeah.
But ever since, NYPD is pretty much, they've gotten relaxed and they're not enforcing it. And that's why I think people have been flaunting the laws.
Mhm. Okay.
But
So-
then also, I look at what you're saying is true, but then there's issues with NYPD, and that people are not getting those jobs like they used to. It used to be a really great job. They're trying to find people to come. So
That's
when
right.
it comes for enforcement, how many people are available to do the enforcement? And
Right.
so, I'm kind of like repetition and stuff. In school, you say things over and over and over. You know your alphabets. You know the periodic table or whatever it is that you had to memorize and stuff. And there's certain things, even with our religion, even with parenting skills, there's certain things you say over and over and over and over and over. Hold my hand when you cross the street. And these PSAs could be anywhere, everywhere, so that people will realize, because we need to be more accountable for ourselves as human beings. We just do whatever we want to do and think it's okay, and no one can't say anything. But anyway, I don't want
So
to
we
take
have a vote on that, the PSA campaigns,
Belt and
you
suspenders.
support those?
We need enforcement, but we also need proper.
Education.
Right,
PSA.
education.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm assuming no opposition to that, we can all vote here, do we have any against?
And that's to add it to this.
That's to add.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
number
Final
4
section,
of the
okay.
final thing.
Okay.
So far, I think we've voted on 3 to 4 things. We voted
voted
on the
on-
striking of the bike lane section,
Right.
replacing it with the representation.
Yeah.
Voted on that. We voted on changing the proposal number from 2 to 3 to 1.
Right.
Yes,
Right,
yes.
for Lincoln Road. And if I recall correctly, the last one was on the PSA campaigns in support of those.
Yes.
Added on to it.
In addition
Encourage
to the
DOT
enforcement section.
Department of Education, schools, NYPD, for any PSAs or
Everybody.
strategic campaigns.
Everybody.
So we should be all good here.
Whether you walk in, scooter in, everybody needs a little PSA every now and then.
Absolutely. Green,
As long as you're not walking
Alright, so we
around
should
with
be
earbuds
good.
in your ear.
We
you
should
don't
It
hear-
could be a
This is
PSA
our
for
last
that, you
meeting.
know?
It is a last
You
meeting.
have to take your earbuds out to hear PSA.
Okay.
Are you coming back next year?
Huh?
Are you coming back to the school?
Yeah, why not?
Why not? Okay.
Okay, all good.
We're good?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Ben.
Second, okay.
Summer recess, oh my God, oh my God. Summer recess.
Yeah.
Ready?
So I'll just run through it.
PSA.